So I'm here with Todd Barlow. This is Craig LeBlanc with Legacy Formation International. And one of the things we do is we highlight successful entrepreneurs, leaders in our community for young entrepreneurs that are getting into that world to try to help them kind of understand the journey they're getting ready to step into. And so one of the ways we do this is to meet with guys like Todd and just get to hear all the peaks and valleys and ups and downs and just the stresses and a lot of the victories that all entrepreneurs go through. And so, Todd, if you wouldn't mind maybe just starting by telling us where you're from, where you came from, and how you kind of got started.
Sure. It's great to be here with you. You know, I'm a Louisiana native, raised in Shreveport, school and here at LSU in Baton Rouge. It's an engineering graduate in petroleum engineering. Got in the boom and out in the bust in the 80s, and found myself sort of in the industrial sales arena where, had some background, the technical background fit into a lot of the sales and marketing, opportunities that were around here at the time. That evolved into a career in utility sector. So I spent a lot of time in, as well as in industry, but in the 90s into water, gas, electric treatment systems, and worked with the great groups along the way that were very supportive, small business, owners primarily that were very successful. So I had a lot of great role models that coached, advised, pushed, and just helped me in general. And it was really through that experience that when I started UtiliWorks, which was a business I founded in 2005, that was really a result of just me being out in the marketplace, asking customers what they were looking for, customers turning to me to really get advice on problems. In this case, it was technology applications for smart metering systems that were used in water, gas, electric utilities. And so we founded a business there in 2005 and went through in a decade of that journey, and just started, sold the business, and in that transition of sorting out the next steps and the next venture along the way. So that's what the new firm Trility Partners is really about. It's at this point it's a boutique consulting firm, but I'm discovering and learning and having fun with it, trying to find the next phase for me.
Right. Now, when was that desire to become an entrepreneur, to start your own business? When did that kind of come to you?
Yeah, it was. I don't think I fit the typical profile of a lot of entrepreneurs that I've met along the way. I've been involved with a lot of them, and a lot of are kind of quick start, super high energy. They kind of knew at an early age. They were very comfortable with risk. My journey was very different from that. There was a feeling that I wanted to do something independently. I wanted to create. I wanted to build something. But I think that hard wiring as a sort of a typical, engineer, strategic planner type, that held me back, I think, in a lot of ways. But it was always there, kind of an itch that I eventually found an opportunity that I decided I could scratch it. And I didn't really grow up around family members or other folks that I was close to growing up. So it was something I just sort of had to bumble and stumble my way into.
Did you ever have any people tell you not to do that?
Oh, yeah. I had a very encouraging spouse, although, she was like, "Are you sure you want to do that?" Because I had a really good job and, had good prospects for the future. But again, I didn't have a lot of voices, really cheering and encouraging me and pulling me along. I think it was mostly, the feedback initially when I said this is what I was going to do, or this is what I am doing, I'm out here in this market, they said, "Well, that's neat. That's interesting. I bet that, sounds like something that the industry, that the world needs at the time." And I think our timing was pretty good with that. But not a lot of strong encouragement, just sort of pulling me that way or encouraging me.
I find that a lot of engineers that we test for entrepreneurship, one of our benefactors and mentors owns an engineering firm here in town, and he says that inevitably every engineer has to manage other engineers. And he says you probably couldn't pick a worse person to manage people than an engineer, because their people skills, that's typically why they're in engineering. Yeah. They love math, they like design and that kind of stuff. If you had to maybe give advice to some young engineers that may want to start a business or something, what advice would you kind of give that type of person?
Well, I think the first thing is to do as much as you can to really get in touch with and become self-aware. I think the engineering label is one that, a lot of people will apply very frequently just because you're studying a particular discipline in school. And, oftentimes it's sort of right. The person is a sort of a natural analytical type, high fact finder, high, analytical skills. But that's not always true. And so I think you've got to combine both what your gifts are, but also get very comfortable understanding your risk profiles, understanding just other skills, the softer skills of, communicating with people, really being able to determine how comfortable you are, leading and managing others. The more aware you are of personality and instincts, I think the better decision you'll make. And it doesn't mean I don't think that you can, if you're sort of the typical engineer, that you necessarily should avoid an entrepreneurial path. But I think it is a little bit more difficult because of just your hardwiring.
When you started your business, what are some things that you feel like you really had to become that you didn't have?
Well, when I started it, one of the early decisions that I made was whether or not I needed a partner, or not. And, I was fortunate in some ways that I had a solid partner that had talent and had just a good, solid, moral compass. But I think, with 10 years of hindsight, you gain confidence in yourself and your own ability. And I think, having a partner was a whole separate dynamic of its own. And I would certainly encourage others to consider that. Lots of times that's the only way into an opportunity for a variety of different reasons. But I would think long and hard about that and whether or not that's something that you really want to do. And I would probably encourage people that if they can figure out a way to kind of go it alone or go it in a structure that's other than a 50-50 structure. I've learned that was not a great structure for building a business. A few people could make it work, but it was less than optimal for decision making and sort of chain of command. And as the company grew and more people around, just that indecision at times that comes when you've got, it's like a marriage, with your spouse. If there's not a clear lines of responsibility, and they often get blurred in those partnerships. So, that's something I learned along the way. Fortunately, it still had a good ending for me, but a lot of folks it doesn't.
Right. How did a lot of your relationships change when you started your business?
Well, I think the relationships that surprised me the most that would change were as we started hiring employees, many of whom were more senior than I was. That was kind of a new role for me. I wasn't used to being the boss in a lot of situations. And again, back to that sort of hard wiring, some people are very comfortable, in an early age, kind of, taking control of the situation or just, leading with clarity. And I think that sort of cautiousness that I had with it was, it didn't serve me well in the beginning. It was just a lot of learning and growing challenges there with trying to deal with more senior people and gain the confidence that, your direction was the right way to go and this is the way we needed to go. But that, dealing with conflict, just all sorts of challenges that came up over those first few years. But the relationships, the dynamic was really centered around probably more employees than anything else. With customers, there was a little bit of a shift too, from becoming sort of, you're the sort of the sales guy or the lead, engagement manager, and they're sort of accustomed to seeing me in that role. And now they sort of know you're the owner of the company. In many ways, it was helpful. The clients that were the best because I think they wanted me to succeed. And sort of by having more skin in the game with them, the relationships, I think, were a little bit deeper and a little bit more personal. So they, were celebrating a little more than, or maybe I was just aware of it more. But that was kind of a really an interesting upside that I had not thought about.
With many entrepreneurs bringing their work home, how are you able to deal with maybe not doing that? Or how did your marriage handle the business venture?
Well, I was fortunate to be grounded. It was something I was aware of from the beginning, and I was accustomed to working, longer and harder hours. But at the time, let's see, '05. So we had, I had 8-year-olds and 2-year-old.
So you had two 8-year-olds?
Yeah. I had twins and
boys, girls,
all girls.
Oh, nice.
And so, and a stay-at-home mom, so that was really important to us. We'd kind of made that decision, that she wanted to stay home and I wanted her to. And that was one of the best decisions we ever made. But it did create some financial stress. As she before children, she had a really, she was very well paid. And so we had, not only had I given up my job, but I've given up this, some of the security that went with it and just sort of being the sole provider. So there was some pressure there. But I really had great people around me. My faith is important to me and my church and community. I just had a lot of support systems in place. And I was very fortunate from an early part of the entrepreneurial part of my career to just really find really quality people that I learned from that sort of showed me this other way of at least trying to balance it. Didn't always do a great job of it, but I think probably better than most that I see that could just get really all consumed with the business.
And what role did faith play in your life and in your business?
I think from a business perspective, it was just knowing that I just really had a solid community of really great, particularly men at the time. I've always been involved with, some form of small group, accountability group of some sort since probably the mid-'90s. And just knowing that you had a place to go on a weekly basis where I wasn't getting business advice, but I had a perspective that it was just sort of all going to be okay, and that I had great systems around me and people, and if I failed, I failed, and there were going to be other people and structures to pick me up, and I could move on. I think it was just sort of that knowing that you had a strong community around you that sort of kept at least worry, somewhat in check.
If your wife were here in this interview, what would she tell us about you?
Hopefully she would say that I've grown up a little bit over the last 10 or 15 years, or matured in some ways. I think the entrepreneurial journey is also very much for me a part of just maturing and being more authentic, being more patient with people, being more comfortable living with ambiguity. So I think, again, back to some of that sort of stereotypical, engineering orientation that's sort of very, structured and risk averse. I mean, I think that's been part of the journey for me. And so when you bring all that home, you're in a very uncertain environment. You can be on edge and you can be stressful, and certainly your spouse feels that the most. So hopefully she would say I'm a little bit more laid back today, and I'm slowly but surely becoming a little bit more the free spirit of our of our marriage.
You said being more comfortable living with ambiguity,
Mm-hmm.
which is huge in entrepreneurship. Can you speak a little more about that? I know a lot of the young entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I think we were just talking,
that.
Before the interview about some other folks who were talking about and sort of being present. And I think for me, I think that's been the lesson, is that, again, I'm sort of hardwired, and I get paid, really well in our business to do a lot of strategic planning, develop projects, these technology projects. I mean, that's what we did as an organization. So both sort of my natural instincts and what I get paid to do oftentimes was to help plan, sort of put structure around a vision. These are for client projects. And so both personally and then professionally, I spent a lot of my time in sort of future mode of, trying to control things. In this case, these are technology projects where they have to be designed and engineered and implemented, and typically over 2 or 3 years. And so there was a lot of, there's a lot of planning and structure that went into those. That being said, that's not the way your business works at all. You can plan all you want, but the market and employees and circumstances can change very rapidly. And so for me, it was a movement from sort of being my instincts kind of kept me more in the future mode to being, how are we today? and what can I, control today, and knowing that today was just probably going to be okay, and that it's just better. I just was a better person when I stayed present with today, because it was the things in the future that I was really, had angst over.
And for those listeners, rewind it 2 minutes and listen to that again, because that is huge advice there. Along the way, did you have any mentors on your journey? And if so, what role did they play in helping you?
Yeah, I really did. I had 2 or 3 that were really significant. A couple came from some deliberate moves that I made to be involved with some coaching programs. I was a part of the strategic coach organization for about 5 years, and a couple of the relationships that I had there, I would go to Dallas once a quarter as part of their program, and you really did get to know the other participants, and a few of those were from other industries. That was really the neatest part about that, was to see from a business perspective, particularly when you're trying to start something up, how it's, every business is different and products or services are different, but there's some fundamental themes that run through all of them. And I really got to see that very clearly by being around these groups that were at all stages and all disciplines, from financial services to retail to a whole variety of different industries. And a couple of those guys just were very supportive to me. They showed me that it was possible to have, some balance in your life, that people could focus and put their family first and still be in business. And I just those sorts of examples and that type of encouragement was very valuable to me. And I think it kept me on track. And then I had some great people, locally as well, that were very influential with, I would say, pushing me in certain areas and exposing, the edges, when I would ask about what this situation was or this, it was really a huge journey of self-awareness. So I think that ability for someone to be really honest with you in the process and say, you're a good person, but you're really not good at this, because that's what you learn very rapidly, is you learn all the things that you're really actually competent at, but you're really not passionate about. And then you learn a lot of where that differentiator is between things that you thought you were good at, but you realize there's other people that are just a lot better. And you're, of course, in the beginning, you're having to do a lot of those things that are, you don't have the luxury to delegate to huge staffs and all that. And so you get real clear real quickly. And then I think the mentors helped me really see some areas where I was really, I thought I was pretty good, but I really wasn't. Sometimes that was painful, but it was needed, and it's sort of helped me along the way.
Now, you've spoken about a coaching program that you were in, and I don't really call myself a coach or sell it or anything, but I do encourage young entrepreneurs to find some type of coach or a coaching program that they can participate in, even at a young level. If you were selling coaching to some young entrepreneur, what would be your pitch to somebody getting into as far as the values and the benefits?
Well, I would say that there's an expression that one guy taught me, was the sort of the shortest distance between 2 points is often wisdom or wise advice in some areas. And so I think there's a lot of truth to that you can sort of be the sort of rugged individual and want to figure out things. And there's sort of a time and a place for that where that's healthy. But if a coach can kind of help you connect the dots faster, that's what I would tell them, was really look for people that can help you connect dots quickly. And I think if you look at coaches in that manner, I think that's healthy. I think the other thing is that you got to kind of balance with the whole idea of coaching is you still have to be your own person. And you've got to be willing to own the decisions. And so if a coach causes you to hesitate, that's not such a good thing. So you really, that's the way I would go into it is, hey, it's an advisor, it's a coach. You still have to go out and perform. You need to make the calls. You don't need to rely on other people to make the judgments. But I think if you have that frame of mind as you approach coaching, that to me is a good balance.
I've heard you mention self-awareness a couple times so far. And I know as a young person, that's a difficult thing because you know so much when you're young and You don't realize how little you know till you get a little bit older. What are some just practical ways that you can kind of keep yourself in check and try to be more self-aware of who you are?
Well, I think certainly reading, as much as you can. And for me, again, my faith journey has been important, very important for that. Just as I've journeyed with just my own spiritual journey, I think you just become more aware. Awareness it's one of those elusive things, for me, and I think for most people that it's just a journey. You would like to think that you're kind of aware when you're in your 20s of all your motives are genuine, and I think sometimes it just shifts. In your 30s and 40s, I think that's what happened with me was that the things that I thought were really important weren't as important. And it's that discovery process, I guess we call awareness, but to me it's just sort of letting go of some of the sort of selfish tendencies and being able to really look at your entrepreneurial journey and your life journey, and the way you make money and the way you bring value to the world is something that you're contributing and not sort of trying to, acquire. I think certainly, we all kind of get a rush when your business is growing and people are buying your products or services, and it's very, rewarding at different levels. But I think that can get confusing to people in their 20s and 30s, as it was for me.
Do you support any nonprofit or volunteer for any charity?
Yeah, we tried it at, there's just a lot of great, causes around, and we were involved with numerous ones that, was running the business. But for us, I think between raising the family, between our sort of Christian journey at church and raising kids and being involved with service projects, through church, I'm involved with things from prison ministries to Bible studies to different things and mission trips. I really like the adventure of mission trips. It kind of opens up your mind to, just a completely different realm of experiences that are really, not that far away from us, but that are millions of miles away in our heads sometimes. So, I've tried to allow space during the business journey for those sorts of experiences, and hopefully, some of the contributions, will make a difference. But certainly I've been very blessed by those experiences to just, come back with just learning something I didn't know before about others, about myself. I think that shift and what I'm trying to do sort of in this next phase of work and life is to look for opportunities where, yes, we still have, some financial realities. And so we need to earn money to pay for college, and we need to save money to take care of, parents and retirement and things of this nature. But hopefully we're doing something that is really serving others. And, and that's what I'm striving for.
I encourage all the young men we work with to find something to give back to. Maybe if you could speak on, you'd said you'd gone on mission trips, and maybe how important that is to making you into just a better person, and how that translates into good business.
I think it just shifts the focus from, to one of gratitude. I think that's been maybe the greatest lesson. We get really wrapped up, or I was very wrapped up in, the business and resources, and how are we deploying those resources, and are we efficient at it? Are customers happy? Do we need to tweak this or tweak that? I was just really, wrapped up in lots of those details. And then when I would participate in some sort of service, or whether it's, reading buddies after school or mission trips or prison ministry or whatever it was, I just sensed that it was pulling me out of the world that I was really sort of overly committed to in some ways. And just waking me up to that the little bit of work that I'm doing here in the business world is, it's a very small sliver of the whole world. And, when I would see children or prisoners or people from other countries, and you just couldn't help but be grateful for all the blessings, that I knew I had, but that I just really was not cognizant about until I pulled myself out of that. So I think when you come back into it from that perspective, I think you don't take yourself quite as seriously. And so I think that helped as well.
Yeah, that not taking yourself too seriously is great advice. Is there anything along the way that you kind of might have slipped through the cracks that you wish you would have paid a little more attention to?
Yeah, several things. I think that the top ones, though, are for the guys and gals that are starting businesses or contemplating it. I can't emphasize enough that it's not just about, an idea or a product or a service. It really needs to be an authentic expression of really who you are. So that product or service it needs to be kind of wired in with your gifts and your abilities. And so I think in the beginning, for me, if I had gotten clearer on that faster, I think it would have made a difference. Because I think ultimately that's how you get your passions into the business. And that's how people see, that's the vision that you cast. And I think the more authentic it is, the more believable it is for employees, the more, it doesn't necessarily mean the world will embrace it. I mean, that there's, you've got to sort of be in the right market, and you have to have a little bit of luck, and you have to have a good product or a service. But I think the difference for people in terms of their gain and their personal growth and development, if that's part of why they're doing it, they need to spend some time on that up front. I wish I'd spent more on that. That's probably the biggest lesson.
That was another good. Todd's dropping pearls here. That was that last minute. Is there anything at a young age you could have done to maybe help that along the way?
I don't know if I could have done anything differently, but I'm very aware of this now that a lot of folks, they just don't have that sort of mentor, that role model that's sort of helping them when you're 16, 18, 22. It's a lot about, and I'm trying to do this with my kids, is just being very intentional about helping them, even if it's discovering what they're really not great at. I mean, we're doing a lot of things right now. The girls got a couple of jobs, and there's some things that I think they'll take the job and they're like, well, that's not it. And it's like, okay, that's good. That's good. That's what we know now. One thing that it's not, and encourage them and give them tools. And of course, I think I have probably more so than my parents, the ability to, provide more insight and direction to my kids. But I still think there's lots of kids out there who are in these formative stages, and hopefully they'll reach out, and there's a lot more tools and part of the programs, and what you're doing here with Legacy is part of that. Is just I think there are more. And it's a little bit easier because to find opportunities to sort of engage in discovery of what you're really good at and where your skills are. But it is a trial and error process. And, you just need people, to me, who can accelerate that learning. And even if it's, even if there's areas that you go down a path that is not you after you've been down that ways for a while, to me, that's still a victory. Because that's the part I think that it took me to my 20s, 30s, probably even till today, really, until I feel like I'm getting close to being able to sort of just live in my strengths, live in passions. I mean, that flows off your tongue really well. And I was attracted to that when I was, reading about those things when I was, 20 or 30. But it's taken me 20, 25 years to sort of really get to a point where I said, okay, I think I'm actually doing it now.
One of the things Legacy does is we say we try to find that successful entrepreneur maybe a decade or maybe even 2 decades before he would have taken that leap, and maybe give him a 10-year head start on that. But we are still working with a 20-year-old, and a lot of the things that you said are acts of a very mature person. And so maybe if you could give some of the early skill sets that a young entrepreneur could be working on when he's young, that is going to be fundamental to running a business.
Yeah, and I think there's really nothing wrong at all. Even someone who has some entrepreneurial aspirations and they're aware of that at some early age or even in college, I think there's nothing wrong with just going to work as an employee in an environment. I would be very selective about where I wanted to work. But even if there was sort of no real opportunity there for some entrepreneurial breakout. Obviously, that would be a nice place to be. Whereas if you come up with an idea to grow a business with inside another business, though, I think is a great path for a lot of people. Really is. It's sort of, to me, it's the best of both worlds, where you could really accelerate your understanding and sort of being immersed in a stable business that can afford to train you, where there's not, instant pressure, to perform, where you have some chances to see businesses go through a few different cycles, maybe an up cycle and a down cycle. Those are great places to teach. And there's most people, I would say, that even though you see some, sort of rock stars out there in the business world who seem to break through at an early age, it's sort of like athletics. It's not the way there's only a minuscule amount of folks that can pull that off. And even then, most of their lives sometimes are not that great. They may have a lot of money, but they don't have a lot of other things in their life. So there's just nothing wrong to me with sort of having that entrepreneurial spirit, but being able to sort of delay exercising that until you're really, quite honestly, most people they're just more prepared when they're 30-ish than they are when they're 20-ish.
Is there any question that I didn't ask that you feel would be useful?
No, these are just great subjects. I think just anything that you guys can do to get the word out to people, provide resources. These stories are really great. I think I wish I had access to them, more of them, along the way. And I think for me, again, I don't think I'd really fit the, sort of that strict entrepreneurial profile, but for hopefully I can be somewhat of a guide to others who are in that same boat. Because even, in these coaching programs and all this, you really didn't see sort of you didn't see many of us sort of engineers that were running businesses, not near as many as the sort of the real, high profile, quick start, dynamic personality types that are really, your typical entrepreneurs. So I think what you're doing shows people that there's just a very wide landscape of people and situations and opportunities. And the more they understand that, the better.
Well, thank you for your time. And I know Gabriel has a couple of questions he wants to throw your way.
I'm just going to give a shout out to Chris King for introducing me to this gentleman right here, Todd Barlow. About a year ago, we met at a Starbucks. I think it was corporate. We had a great conversation, and it's been a phenomenal year. So I really appreciate you taking the time for sharing with me and Legacy and the audience that are listening to this audio. Want to just share a video that I'm going to be posting in the show notes. Video with Gary V, the one and only Gary V, and he talks about self-awareness. That's something that today Todd got to mention a couple of times, and he during our business calls that we have, meeting calls that we have at this 2015, we share about this strategic coach program, the unique ability. So I would love to share more about that, and if you can just share your unique ability and how was that exercise for you.
Yeah, sure. The exercise is really to try to sharpen the line between those things that you're not good at, those things that you're pretty good at, those things that you're maybe really good at, and those things that you're really good at and you're passionate about. I mean, essentially, that's what the unique ability discussion at Strategic Coach is about. And so I guess the journey that I went on through that, it was multiple parts. I mean, there's some sort of skills test and knowledge and self-awareness of what you already know you're good at. But they take you through a few exercises where you get to take people from your sort of a questionnaire that you get different people around you in a work environment, personal environment, people who know you from different walks, and just say, hey, what do I have in those areas? What is this person really good at? What are they passionate about? And I think the idea of that is that sometimes we don't see it in ourselves, and that you're sort of eliciting some feedback for some others in those specific areas. And they kind of walk you through a number of exercises that put some labels to that and really help you get clear on it. So, my unique ability statement that kind of emerged from that was one that was, I explore opportunities and develop plans that produce growth, trust, and result in meaningful relationships. That's kind of my statement. And so the idea would be to take something like that.
You say that again?
Yeah, it was to explore concepts and develop plans that produce growth, trust, and meaningful relationships. And so for me, that's the zone I need to try to stay in. And there's a certain, group of 5 or 10 kind of skills in that area. And the idea is that you can really apply those to all walks of life, so that, ideally you'd be applying that in your business life and staying kind of in those zones and getting clear on what those skills are. But it should also be something that ideally, if you're not going to be a boring person and you've got other, interest, that where you're serving or volunteering or doing other things, you try to incorporate, if you could do your volunteer work and stay in that zone, you're going to do it with a lot more energy and passion.
Yeah. I think Pete Bush, which we're going to be having in the show pretty soon, it's a good friend of yours, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, Pete's great.
Yeah, and you introduced him to Strategic Coach.
Yeah, I did. I was. He knew about it before I did, but he didn't go. And then since then, he's become a big contributor there.
Yeah, I was excited when he mentioned that. We went to his house and he was sharing, kind of like you're doing today, his story with us. And he was saying that it's that unique ability is what makes you excited and makes your feet go like, oh my gosh, this is my zone. So you gave us your statement, but what's that thing that you really enjoy doing?
Yeah, so I think some of it's bound up in there. I think, for instance, the growth, trust, peace, meaningful relationships. I just need to be around people that are wanting to kind of grow and improve, whether it's their business or to do a project, to build things. I mean, I just like being around people who are in sort of expansion mode. The trust and communication piece, I learned that I work much better with probably individual and small groups than I say, Pete, for instance, he's very effective at getting in front of a big audience and telling stories and doing his thing. And, he's great at that. It's like, okay, that's not really my gift. I can do it if I need to. I can attempt to do it, but it's not really my strength. But, it's sort of like the guy who can either just sort of work the entire room, or are you one that is going to go off here, and it's the introvert extrovert thing. But you just kind of know who you are, and you've got to be in zones where you can be effective. So that's how I can be this is an example. And I think certainly to do the things you like doing, like the strategic planning we were talking about, and exploring and researching and connecting the dots and the patterning, that's kind of the analyst and engineer in me coming out. But yeah, I need to be doing a certain amount of those things, because that's just, that's what gives me energy. But also, the people too. I mean, I think that's a big part of it, is you've got to be really around people who want to go a little bit deeper. If you're just wanting to kind of keep it at the surface, I'm probably not your guy.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm drilling down on this and the self-awareness and the specific detail of the exercise, because I get, asked a lot. In fact, Taylor, he's graduating in May and petroleum engineer, but he loves entrepreneurship. So, just your story will be really helpful. But when I talk about this self-awareness exercise and books, like for example, the Strengths Finder, are you aware of that?
Right, yeah. Right.
So all of that, to me, that was really powerful. Takes me 20 minutes. After that, it gives me a result. It's easy. Now, this statement in particular, the growth, trust, peace, and meaningful relationship, is that something that you build yourself, or you kind of got out of the whole?
Yeah, that was sort of the byproduct of the exercise. And again, this is not particularly narrow. It's not designed to necessarily be sort of one particular thing that you do, but it's a statement that represents who you are and then what you do in general. And then behind that, I think I've got them over here somewhere. There's maybe 10, very specific skills that you apply that are kind of your top 5 or 10 skills. And so, some of those for me might be looking at patterns, with information and data. That's kind of the connecting the dots piece. And so there might be another one that's that literally is about planning, just in general, because that's what I do. So, you'll come away with a statement that hopefully you can apply to a number of things, and then you'll come away with, 5 or 10 very specific skills. And again, I think you got to couple that though with things like Strength Finders. I mean, that's a great tool. The DISC profile on your personality, that's a gives you insights. These are all things that are quick. There's one that I really like called Kolbe, Kolbe, and it's sort of an instinctive sort of what it's not personality and it's not necessarily skills, but it's just sort of how you get things done in the world. And that goes into what we were talking about earlier, whether you're sort of the quick start type, which is kind of one of their designations. Do you jump in and just sort of create things very quickly, or are you more of a fact finder or a follow through? Which again, and to the guy's point in the video, it's not a right or a wrong. It takes a team of all these different types to be very effective. And so the more you know about yourself and about others, the more I think effectively you can build a team and keep yourself kind of dialed in where you need to be.
Yeah. Can we look at yours real quick?
Yeah.
Go ahead and pause it.
So here are the top 10. They call them the best habits. Builds trust and comfort with others, seeks improvement through growth and learning, maintains focus on well-defined objectives, anticipates obstacles and future consequences, evaluates patterns and connections in complex situations, imposes order and structure to get results, demands support evidence for concepts and methods, plans and prepares, creates space and time for reflection and introspection. So those would be 10 very specific habits that emerged from that exercise. It was kind of a combination of some stuff I knew about myself, but also what other people were telling me, and just information that you glean from some of these tests. So the idea is to take that and to get it into something very clear, statements. Again, easier said than done when you said, okay, I'm going to, start a business and I'm just going to stay and I'm only going to do these 10 things. I mean, it's very difficult to do in the beginning of any endeavor. But
I think one of the biggest risks for young entrepreneurs is the mentality that, you can do it all or you can learn. Especially, mid-20s, you think, oh, yeah, I just watch, a couple tutorials on YouTube. I'll learn how to do it, right? And I think the value of understanding what am I really good at was going to save me a lot of wasted time, or, what Perry Marshall calls the, $5, $10 an hour task, when you should be doing $1,000 an hour task, that it's completely related to the, your unique ability. That's where you should be spending your time. Now, jump into sales, and how do you think sales, influences everything in business?
I mean, it clearly does, and I think that was a challenge in our business because we were coming from a very traditional, bureaucratic, institutions with utilities and such, even public procurement laws and things like that. So it makes it very difficult if you've doing anything kind of out of the box. But the way I guess I address it, because there's a lot of very specific skill sets that are needed to sell. And a lot of times you'll see that the entrepreneur has a lot of gifts in that area, because the people who I think are gifted with the sort of the quick start, bold, big ideas, high level of communication, sometimes those are people that are very good at selling. So you see a lot of, I think, probably a disproportionate share of startups that are being kind of driven essentially by kind of like the sales type guy or the concept guy. Not always, but a lot of them. But I think what they have to do, if you are that guy, I think it's good to be aware of it and really stay in your zone and as long as you can and leverage that. But I think the flip side of it is, if you don't have those skill sets, you've got to get them on your team quickly. And you have to, I think you got to couple that though with also, depending on what your product or service is and the way people are buying. I mean, the world's ever changing. And I've spent a lot of time in the last year or so looking at, e-commerce and the way people are connecting and I just think there's a lot of innovation going on out there. There's a lot of ways to reach people right now that you couldn't, reach. There's a lot of emphasis on referrals. I mean, the best entrepreneurs I know and the best businesses are almost all out of sort of in the service sector anyway, all of referral-based selling. And so there's a certain, you don't necessarily have to be, there are a few skills that you've got to have on your team and core to the group, but there is a lot you can do, I think, with sales on a referral basis. So even if you don't sort of have the exact hard wiring that's most typical.
Great. I think the next session I had, what's your key to success?
I think for me, the definition of success has definitely changed. It's gone from one that was largely driven, by financial and sort of quality of life, and quality of life is still important. But I do think for me, it's a work in process, but I think my definition is becoming more about really being free to really, to be yourself and to, earn a living at it and deliver value. And hopefully it's a value that will, allow you and your, family to prosper. But I think to be able to be really free, to meet all your needs and get ahead, and but to be yourself and to have some of the time. At the end of the day, that's really it's just about where you spend your time and where you spend your money and your resources. And so I think for me, it's getting bound up in that freedom just to be yourself.
Yeah. Well, I think now you say in the past couple of years, you've been able to relax a little bit more, enjoy it. But we also talk about the word striver and the guy that is always looking. And now I wanna emphasize that, because in my case, and I talk about this with my girlfriend when I'm enjoying a business book, when I'm having free time. So but that's a passion. I love learning about, like you say, e-commerce, or hanging out and into a conference with a bunch of other 300 entrepreneurs. But it's the same thing. So some sort of that arena where you become a workaholic. It's always about work. When you're gonna stop? So can you share how you deal with that and how you keep that balance?
Yeah, I think this is one area where I think faith and the spiritual journey, Christian journey specifically for me, has helped. One thing, for instance, that's been I don't remember when, but in the last 5 or 6 years, I really got serious about honoring the Sabbath and really not working, at least on that day. And I read a lot about Sabbath and, had to kind of immerse myself into what it really meant, what the connotations are. But a few of the things that I learned was that, hey, that's a day. And it doesn't necessarily, most people think it's a Sunday, but I think for different people, it can be a different day of the week. But it just needs to be at least a day of the week where, you really are just not striving. That was the kind of the word that came up for that for me, was because even on days where I was sort of free to do what I want, like you're talking about, there was no urgent deadlines. I found myself sort of, I wasn't the type that was just my wife's a big, she reads fiction a lot. It's like, I've never read fiction much. I wish I did.
Yeah.
I'd probably be a better person. But so I've just had to try to really, this sounds kind of twisted, but I really had to start treating it and kind of do a little bit of planning and scheduling just to prevent all the stuff that represented striving for me. So it meant really, really turning off electronics. It meant spending a lot more time outdoors, just where I couldn't, hiking, running, walking. It meant listening to more music. I had to really come up with some things. It meant reading a little fiction. It meant scheduling just more fun time with my kids, riding bikes. But I found myself having to really kind of work at it a little bit to not to start striving, start learning, start doing a little bit of work, clean up, start organizing, start planning. All that was a part of it. So it was a bit of you just really see how addicted you are to it. So for me, it kind of started with that one day. And then I certainly think, like in the strategic coach, they talk about free day being kind of this 24-hour midnight to midnight where you're really sort of not striving as well. And so if you start trying to blend those days into your routine, I think that's how you kind of stop the process or at least start a better process.
Yeah, I heard about the self-managed company.
Yeah.
Is that a term that sounds familiar to you?
That has been. I don't know as much about that. I think that's more recent years since I was involved. But yeah, I don't know. That term doesn't really connect to me because I don't know too many things that you can just put on autopilot like that. Especially with people, maybe there's some e-commerce opportunities that are more just
autopilot.
Yeah, but I can't really relate to that one.
Yeah, no, I see. Well, we're finishing up the year. Well, it's 2 days or maybe half a day, right? And a lot of people are planning, including myself. So we were chatting about a month ago on a call, and I said, you know what, we should share that on the podcast. So can you share more of your goal setting and how you plan for next year on a personal level?
Yeah, there's lots of tools that I've used, over the years of the 80s and 90s and the Franklin Covey days and things like that. So there's just lots of tools that I've accumulated. But I think the things that end up helping me the most in recent times have been really just setting aside some time to be I call it just think time, just really where you're really uninterrupted and you can do a little bit of honest appraisal of sort of what's worked the last year and what hasn't worked. You can spend some time on, not only I think with the goals, for the coming year, and obviously if you can tie those goals into an overarching, vision with your business that's sort of driving you beyond just, a 12-month planning cycle. Hopefully there's something you've done in your business planning and your goal setting that's larger than that. But I think you could revisit that for those that are doing that sort of, what am I going to do the next 10 years? What am I going to do the next 20 years? I mean, this bigger picture stuff. Hopefully your 1 years can be aligned and supporting those larger ones. So that would be, if you don't have any of those, I would suggest you look around. There's just so many tools out there and great people and books and things that are resources to guide you. But it comes down to really spending the time and getting away and getting kind of in a good environment, for me anyway, where I can really think about that. And just great questions, if you just look around and just focus on, sometimes the planning piece of it is a little mechanical, but I think if you can just ask, develop a great list of questions and just start asking those questions. And so for me, I've tried to get it down to where I do no more than sort of, 5 to 8 kind of goals for the year. And I try to get goals that are sort of big enough and overarching that they spill over into different areas of my life. They're not just business goals. They're just other things that are important to me. So, kind of try to do kind of a 360 look at, these are my business objectives. These are family objectives. These are, service objectives. These are sort of spiritual practices and work that I'm working on, and so I kind of look at it from a 360 view and try to distill all that into 5 to 7 goals. And I think I'm better served doing that, and then trying to attach to those, why am I doing this? And so I used to just write down the goal, and then lately I've been writing down, why is that important to me? Because I think during the course of the year you get sidetracked with things, and I think if you've got a few statements about why that's important to you when you look back on it in April or August, if you haven't accomplished it yet, I think it gives you some energy to recommit to it if you've gotten really clear on why you're doing it.
You give us an example of one of those. For example, I was working on this last weekend and I got some insight. And again, you say there's so many tools, there's no right or wrong, but we're talking about your particular way. But one of the insights that I got last week was, instead of, saying the goal to be, I'm going to work out 6 times a week, that's not really the goal. That's what you're doing to achieve the goal, which can be lose 10 pounds, right? And then, out of that goal, which is losing 10 pounds, or maybe even better, having 170 pounds body, that may be the goal. And then the reason you say the why, well, because I want to feel energized or have some vitality or whatever you want to do as a reason. And then the list of things that you're going to do to accomplish that goal. But can you walk us through one of your goals and what's the outcome? And then you list the activities or how you track that. Because another question that I have about goals is, once you don't hit the goal, which it happens the majority of the times, like I look back and I reach for the moon and I ended up with the stars, which is great. But, any thoughts about that?
Yeah. So I think what you're asking is a great point, which is, what is sort of the essence of the goal? And so physical health, is one. So, but I think for most people, and it gets more important as you get a little bit older, So I think, there's some very specifics, that were in the goal setting process. In fact, we exchange. I think another great idea is just to simply, if you have a group of people or one or two that you can just share some of your goals with. A lot of people don't have that, and that's very powerful in a sense. Just having one or two people to say, "Hey, here, these are my goals for this year. What do you think?" To have someone challenge and clarify and affirm is very, very helpful, and it kind of makes it a little bit more real for you just to have someone else look at your goals that are written down and comment on them. That's very powerful. But I think with each of those, if you look and say what's the essence of the goal, so you're right. If it's physical fitness and all that, I think the essence of it is that, well, it's not only that I want to lose the weight or make this ailment go away or lower my cholesterol or whatever it is, but it's that you really want to be operating at a high capacity. You really want to be able to, be there for your family. You want to be able to do the things maybe you used to be able to do. And a lot of people get in the 50s, 60s, 70s, they lose their mobility and they can't do things they want to do. So, if it's that you like to go snow skiing and you're 75, well, you got to do some things to kind of prepare for that. So that is the driving force maybe behind, I'm going to go to the gym, 3 days a week and I'm going to lose 10 pounds. Well, it's really, if you can find some drivers that, hey, I really want to go snow skiing when I'm 75 because it's what I love to do. I'm inspired by it. So I think if you can attach some meaning to the goals, that's always very, very helpful. So I'm not sure if that answered your question.
Yeah, I think the only point I'm trying to get as well is when you set up the goals in the past 5 years, for example, you set up your goals, you didn't reach that particular goal. How do you deal with that?
That can be tough at times. I'm probably harder on myself. And again, this is more kind of learning to live presently that we talked about before, because sometimes it is. Sometimes you do. You're right. You've exceeded it, and it's only April. But for every one of those, I'm pretty unrealistic about things usually, and I'll set some goal that's in hindsight. But what I found is that most of them are achievable. You just may have the wrong duration on the time. And so that's another way I like to look at it is that, there's a lot of these cases I set out to do that in 1 year, but you know what? It took me 3. I saw a lot of examples with that with business, with targets that we hit. I mean, we pretty much mostly got to where we were set out to go. It just took us it took us in a lot of cases another year or 2 or 3 to get there. And so I guess that's what I would tell people is just don't be so hard on yourself sometimes and just say, okay, in the coach world, they talk about celebrating your progress and, being grateful for the journey that you're on. And it's a lot of it has to do with where you're measuring from. When you're measuring from where you started and you're just looking backwards all the time from where you've been, then you naturally feel and sense the progress. If you just sort of look forward and you're making progress, but you're looking at some goal that still hasn't been accomplished. And if you're kind of the striver type, you get kind of down on yourself because you haven't accomplished it. And so I think just to do an annual review of those and say, if the goal is still worthwhile, if it fits into my bigger vision, if it fits into my values, if I'm still behind this goal, just tweak it a bit and keep going after it if you're making progress. On the other hand, if it's something that's just draining your energy, it's not life-giving, you're not quite sure, it seemed like a great idea at the time, and it's just not coming together, then, that's part of it too, is just saying, okay, that one's just got to go. I just got to let it go, accept that I learned something from it. You almost always learn something and move on. Right. So I think it's a great time of year just to look at and take an inventory of all that. And just, again, if you can kind of keep it to 5 or 10 goals, in my thinking, as someone who's overdone it plenty, I'm encouraging only there's a great book I read in the last few years called Essentialism. And that book helped me a lot. It's really about, I think it's the subtitle is The Disciplined Pursuit of Less. And that sort of resonated with me and sort of making things more simplistic if I can and trying to let go of some of the complexity. And that's a great book for people if they're for the strivers out there.
I think one of the chapters that I really love, it was about play. He talks about play. And I think that's my last question to close is you share more about your learning routines and, you reading, any podcasts or conference or audiobooks. How do you keep growing in a personal level?
Yeah, I think to me, it kind of starts with time. Like that's going to be one of my goals this year is just have just more what I would call kind of free space, in my week. So just really blocking out time, much like we talked about the free day, Sabbath kind of concept. This is more just blocks of time that I want during the week that I'm just going to say no to some other things and really, really protect those, because that's kind of what I'm missing right now. I find that I have to, I'll just let stuff crowd away. And so a lot of the stuff that I want to do to stay fresh and sharp, the reading, the audiobooks, I did that this year, and I kind of ramped that up a bit, which has been helpful. It kind of allows me to listen while I'm still, walking or doing something else, riding in the car or something. Yeah, I think, for me, all those learning things, which I'm really driven to do that sort of work, I've got to be a little bit better manager of time and keep those free blocks of time out there where I can do the reading and do the, sometimes it's, just attending. There's a lot of stuff online, but they all, take time. And so that's what I'll be working at this year.
Fantastic. Well, appreciate your time, Todd. Appreciate your time, and everybody is listening. Go ahead and take action. What is called the net time, no extra time needed. That's why we put together this podcast. So when you're running, working out, whatever you're doing, biking, you can listen to this and get inspired. Like Todd, he keeps inspiring me every month. So hopefully this year we get to invite him again and catch up. And what is he up to? Anything else you want to add, Craig or Todd?
Thanks, Gabe. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.